All right, welcome and happy Tuesday, everybody. This is our last life hacking session right before spring break. I hope you are all so excited. I know that I am, but we are just at the beginning of this week. So welcome back to Life Hacking 101. And just as a reminder, these weekly sessions, these life hacking sessions are a collaboration between student services or student life, career services, and the HCC libraries. And this week, we have a session titled, I read it in the news, so it must be true, but is it? With our awesome Katy campus government professor, Mark Tiller. And so I am going to hand over the baton. And as we go through this session, as you have questions, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and just ask as we go along. Or if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and I will let Professor Tiller know them as they pop up. So without further ado, welcome, Professor Tiller. Love having you here.
Thank you. To all you students, if you have questions or comments you want to make during the middle of this, that's perfectly fine for me to just chime in. You can unmute yourself anytime. It's such a small crowd, and there's no reason to wait necessarily till the end to ask questions. So if you have anything to say or anything to ask, please ask. And if you want to put your cameras on and talk to me directly, that's even better. So up to you how you want to handle it. So we have 17 participants suddenly. Wow, it jumped up a lot. So any questions before we start? What this is about or why are we doing anything? Let me just say real quickly, that when I was a kid, we pretty much the whole country got our information in pretty much the same way. We read the same kind of newspapers or magazines. There was ABC, CBS, and ABC, NBC Evening News that pretty much the whole country watched at the same time. Up until the 1980s, like about a fourth of the country was tuned in to one of those two channels at all times, and they were all pretty much the same. So even if you were a kid playing on the floor with my little Hot Wheels or something, I still heard my parents' version of the news, and we all pretty much agreed what the facts were. We were all aware of the same stories. The ABC, CBS, NBC were pretty much identical. They were not very partisan or biased in either direction, pretty much straight news. And so the next day at school, everyone heard the same stories. We were all in the same information pool, We're not in our little separate hot tubs the way we are now. So we had the same base of information. And the other big difference, of course, is that there are always people, putting out disinformation, making up crazy conspiracy theories, and just obsessively strange people out there. But they were isolated from each other. They were in this barn down the road, the crazy old man that lives down there or something. Now, because of the internet, they can all unite. So even if they're only 1 out of 10,000 people in the community, across the country, that's a lot of people. And they become a powerful force in spreading their views and their arguments and their positions and their disinformation, if you wish. So those are fundamental differences than it was when I was your age myself, or younger. So I'm going to put a PowerPoint up here now. And again, chime in if you have questions or comments. Yeah. Hold on, now I can't get this box out of the way in the bottom. It popped everybody's boxes up over my controls here, Sean.
If you grab the very top bar of everybody's above all the cameras, you can move it up.
Yeah, I tried. Hold on. Let me start over. Sorry, guys. I always use Canvas for this before.
So while we're working through these issues, again, y'all are more than welcome as we go through the session to unmute yourself and ask questions. Think about things that you've been seeing in the news recently that you might have questions about. And I see already a comment in the chat. Oh, and my chat went away. Okay. And do y'all remember the phrase alternative facts? What a weird time that was. That's a comment in the chat.
Sean, I can't get to the bottom box there because all the people's names are covering up the bottom box there that allows me to expand the screen.
Okay, so at the top of your screen, you should have the option to hang on, slideshow, and then,
Yeah, I'm in that.
well, no, from your top ribbon.
How do I move everybody's off? Oh, I see. I can move it now. Got it. I figured it
Okay.
out. Nope. Wow. I never had this problem before.
Okay, so when you see everybody's pictures, at the very top of likely your camera or my camera, there should be a black bar that you should be able to just grab and click and drag it around.
Yeah, it's on the bottom. I just did drag it away, but now it still doesn't let me activate the thing. I'm gonna stop and start over, okay?
Okay.
It's just okay. Now the black bar is at the top, so hopefully I can do it now.
It keeps moving around on you.
Yeah, it's putting it back a little way. It's not letting me maximize the screen anymore.
Okay, so I'm talking in PowerPoint at the top in your ribbon. When you have PowerPoint, there's a slideshow option at the ribbon at the top.
I'm not in that anymore. Hold on 1 second. Jeez. I'm sorry, guys. I'm used to doing this in Canvas.
It's all right. We're going to make it work.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
See that bar of everybody's, it's just blocking me from getting to anything.
Down at the bottom and at the top.
Hold on. There we go. All right.
Yay, success. Okay.
Okay, what is on y'all screen now?
Your PowerPoint.
Okay, and it doesn't show everybody's names and pictures? No?
It does not. It only shows your PowerPoint.
So I'm just gonna move it as far as I can out of the way so I can't see it. So, all right, thank you. Sorry for the trouble, guys. On the left here, you see what I was referring to earlier. We're in a so-called post-truth era, in which basically we don't know what's real, what's believable, what's reality. We used to always argue about politics, of course, and we'll never stop arguing about politics, and we should never stop arguing about politics. But we shouldn't have to argue about what facts are, because there is such a thing. So look over in this list of our terms on the left. These are all terms that we didn't used to talk much about in political science, but now we do. You have any questions about these terms on the left? Do you know what they mean? Most of these are relatively new terms. I'm assuming you guys know about some of these, but maybe not all of them. Any questions about them?
The post-truth area.
The which one?
This look like it's hard to explain.
That's okay.
But it's something like it's the topic here. What I think is the pass through era. I mean, like it is
Post-truth, meaning we used to have some agreement about what facts are, but now facts are very spongy. They're the truth is very spongy. We don't agree on what the truth is. So it's one thing to disagree about what we should do as policies, but shouldn't be having to argue about what actual facts are.
Okay.
So
well, we had, I'm sorry to interrupt. We had two questions in the chat. One person's asking what is denialism, and the other is asking what is fallacious reasoning.
Yeah, a fallacy is simply a poorly constructed argument, an illogical argument, one which the premise, the reasons, the evidence doesn't truly lead to the conclusion. Of course, this is nothing new. This has been discussed from ancient Greek philosophers to now in your English classes and philosophy classes. But we have much more fallacious reasoning these days, it seems to me. The other one, denialism, basically denying actual facts. People just refuse to actually recognize real facts. It's often associated with the big lie. The big lie basically is a term people use to reference Nazi propaganda in World War II, for example. The chief minister of propaganda, Goebbels, said, if you keep on repeating something over and over, as outrageous as possible, doesn't matter, eventually people will start believing it. because it's being said repeatedly from official sources, so it must be partly true. So any other terms you want to talk about? Well, let's go on then. So the First Amendment to the Constitution, you've all heard this all the time. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of the press, right? Does that guarantee truthfulness, do you think? Is that the reason for it? Does it guarantee that you have a right to hear the truth somehow? It was never meant to guarantee truth. It guarantees choices, right? It guarantees that people can freely express their views, their arguments in the speech or in the press and otherwise. They can argue for changes through a peaceful assembly, and they can petition or request changes. They can freely express their views. It doesn't guarantee the truth. The reason why this is so important, that we have free expression, that we can have a rational public discussion and debate, is because that's fundamental to getting to something that's productive and useful. Just like, for example, Adam Smith, sometimes called the founding father of capitalism, more than 200 years ago, said free economic competition in the marketplace, like when we go to buy and sell our goods and services, that will result in a good outcome because people want to make money. We have choices. We can choose the best products, and the best products will rise to the top and be adopted by people. We make mistakes occasionally. We buy something that doesn't work, but we don't buy it again, right? So if you have freedom in the marketplace, overall, it results in a good social purpose, a good social effect. The best products rise to the top. We choose those. Well, wouldn't it be the same for ideas? Wouldn't we want to also freely exchange our ideas in public with the understanding that people are smart enough, capable enough, wise enough to make the best choices over the long haul? In the long term, we may make some mistakes. We may vote for some things we don't like, that don't work very well, but we learn from our lessons. We don't do it again. So wouldn't freedom in terms of speech also be good, produce a good outcome, that people have enough sense to choose the best ideas, as long as we're all out freely available to us? We don't censor them. We don't say you can't sell this product or we can't sell this idea. Everything's freely available, and we make the best choices and pick the best products. So generally speaking, that's called the marketplace of ideas, that we need to be able to freely, factually, truthfully debate the arguments and the issues and the facts so that we can choose the best ideas, and those best ideas will come to the top of the heap. So we make failures occasionally, but we learn from our lessons. So the problem is, in capitalism, there are sometimes market failures, right? There are some things that don't work perfectly. Some people monopolize the market, or they use deceptive trade practices, or they don't care about the terrible inequities that exist because of it sometimes. There are all kinds of market failures. So we have regulations and rules that government makes to try to correct those problems. So there's some concern about public investment, not just private investment. So there's concern about the public good or the greater good. So there are market failures with capitalism, and there are market failures and ideas as well in the social sphere. So in our media age we're in now, we have a different kind of an age than what I grew up in. When I mentioned earlier, we were all on the same page. We have a professional media still, which we generally call the mainstream media, and although they use that term negatively, they use that term to mean somehow it's somewhere less than proper or less than good. I've always been amazed that people will sometimes tell me, when I say I'm not aware of some issue they've heard about, they'll say, oh, that's because you only listen to the mainstream media. Or even worse, they'll say it's the lame stream media, as if it's somehow inferior, not very good, not worthy. But yeah, the professional media are people trained to do it properly and ethically and with good standards and with fact checking and proofing and editing, etc., as opposed to the non-professional media that you may get your information from today, which is really haphazard. Some of it is good and some of it isn't. Maybe a comedian or blogger, maybe somebody sitting in their grandmother's basement typing out something that looks official, calling himself a citizen journalist. We don't know. There are lots of internet news channels that have very sloppy standards now. So sometimes you, the public, doesn't know, is this a professional source or an unprofessional source? It's hard to know. Also, then we get a lot of information from social media, increasingly, especially in your generation. Your generation gets most of its information from social media, which is not always peer reviewed or checked for facts or edited properly, etc. And of course, we limit ourselves typically into peer groups that believe like we do. So we hear our own voice echoed back to us in these so-called echo chambers. Instead of hearing different points of view, we live in an information cocoon where we're surrounded with a protective defense, so that we only hear things that we agree with. We're not triggered or offended by people that saying something we disagree with. Or we live in an information bubble, in other words. So we're not able to really share those ideas the way the information marketplace is supposed to work, when they're not able to freely compete with each other. Like apples and oranges compete in a grocery store. So we choose the best apples and best oranges. If we don't have available all these different ideas because we're only limiting ourselves to our own social media peer groups, then we don't have a true marketplace of ideas. Instead, we get confirmation bias. I'm assuming you've probably heard of this term before, many of you. Confirmation bias means basically that we limit ourselves to things that confirm our own previously held biases. So when we hear something that disagrees with our views, that's contrary to our views, we delete it. We don't give it any credibility. We don't look at it. We don't read it. We don't follow up on it. We just say it's fake news or it's wrong or it's stupid, and we delete. But if we get something that we agree with, we pass it on to all our friends. We say, this is great, right? And we don't even check it out necessarily, or we don't even necessarily even read the story to make sure it's true, that it's got good sources. So that's another way we get the news. We also get information based on bots and trolls, robots, meaning programs that are designed to make it appear like they're a human interacting with this media story, hitting it or liking it or passing it on or commenting on it. It's a program, a robot, a program that's designed to make it appear that it's very popular and trending. It may get 40 million hits, but only one of those or two of those are actual people, and the rest of it's a bot. So people think this is a trending story, and it starts becoming very popular. And a troll, as you probably know, is someone who basically is just trying to stir up trouble, causing to be a provocateur, we used to call them. Someone who wants to provoke you, in other words, into believing something or being angry or upset. A lot of the interference from foreign sources we had in 2016 were trying to divide us, one group or against another, by very, very provocative posts and information. They influence how we get the news. And then sometimes it's just blatantly false, just fake news. That term has evolved over the years, but originally it meant just basically something that was either a joke or a comedy or some kind of parody. Or then it evolved into things that were what we call now clickbait, trying to get you to click on a site with some outrageous story so that it drives up their number of views so that you get more revenue for your advertising. The more people see your site, the more advertising you get for it, therefore more advertising revenues, I mean. And today it's increasingly just political manipulation and disinformation, where someone is trying to use this story to promote a false narrative, to make you confused, to make you believe something is false. And around the world now, this term fake news is being used by authoritarian leaders, undemocratic leaders, to dismiss any news they don't agree with. They call it fake news in their own language, but it's still, they transliterate it as fake news. It's become an international word, like okay is an international word. So all this leads to a lot less fact checking, like proofing. We have much fewer barriers to publication than before. You don't have to have a brick and mortar source. You don't have to have a building. You don't have to have photocopiers and machines and coffee brewers and file cabinets. So anyone can publish now, which means very little standards, very little proofing and fact checking. So because of this deterioration of standards now, it leads to very misleading and biased and even outright false information now. So that's the media age we're in now. I'm not trying to say it was all perfect before, it certainly wasn't, but we had a pretty good, strong agreement about basic information facts, what was real. So what can you do as an individual here? What are you able to do about this personally? You can look at different sources, compare the quotations and cited statistics with alternative sites. You should never be relying on one source in anything. Even if you think it's a great source, you agree with it, always go to another source, at least one other source, hopefully from an alternative point of view. So never rely on just one source, as this meme tells you. We have this abundance of memes now that determine most of my students' point of view on many different issues. It seems like they're always citing some meme. Doesn't mean it's anything. If you can't check this out on the internet, don't believe it. It's a good rule of thumb. Memes are meant to oversimplify. This one was very influential in the 2016 election by Republican opponents of Donald Trump. When he first decided to run, a lot of the fellow Republicans said, who is this guy? What is he doing? He's not a real Republican. So they passed around this. It's still going around the web today. And it sounds like Trump to some degree, doesn't it? But it isn't. There is no evidence he said this at all. In fact, Fox News which is supposedly be what he's referring to here, wasn't even a popular conservative channel in 1998, which this purports to be. This is not from People magazine. This picture is from an interview on Oprah Winfrey, and he didn't say that on that show. But people are still passing that around as if it's the truth. The problem is that sometimes that a real story may have an element of truth in it. Did Obama actually request when he left office a higher increase in the budget that funds presidential pensions and presidential libraries and resources staffers for former presidents? Did he ask for that fund to go up? Yes, he did. Does anybody know why he did?
I would guess inflation.
Well, there's that. There's always a little bit of inflation. There's another reason why it needed to go up. It had a new president, him. Every time a new president joins the ranks of former presidents, you have to add more money to the budget, right? Now, when a president dies, you detract some money from the budget because you don't need that pension for that president that died. But that's the truth in it. It wasn't trying to increase his own salary. He was just doing his job as president to recommend a budget increase for this particular item, as he did for many, many other thousands of things. So besides looking at different sources, quotations, et cetera, alternative sites, look for different sources that don't confirm your biases in general. Look for sources that on the other side of the spectrum. You may have seen this before, some of you, and there's many versions that's going around the web now. This basically just identifies the different kinds of sources you may encounter. Some down here on the bottom with very misleading information and propaganda, et cetera, on the liberal side and the conservative side. Some that are somewhat complete. You want to try to shoot for items up here in this area up here. Now, some of them are basically just facts. Some of them are more analysis, but this is the fair part up here. This is the part you want to shoot for. So if you're reading something over here, then read something over here and vice versa. That's a good way of keeping yourself honest and keeping the news honest. What you're trying to do, of course, is avoid confirmation bias. Look what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. I assume most of you have heard of him. He's a very famous guy. He says he dreams of a world in which truth is what shapes politics. Wouldn't that be nice if we made our political decisions on the basis of what the truth is, instead of deciding what's true based on our politics? This picture on the inside is showing when a member of the Senate of Oklahoma, a senator, brought in a snowball into Congress and said, see, global warming is not true. It's snowing outside. That's not science, I hope you know. So we want to listen to alternative sources because we want to avoid falling into confirmation bias of only believing people that believe like we do, that our truth being shaped by our political views instead of deciding what is our political views based on truth. A third thing you can do is investigate photos more carefully. Investigate videos, graphics, charts, visuals, labels. You know, you guys especially are the visual generation more than any other generation before. You're more likely to look at things, videos, charts, graphs, diagrams, pictures, little clips of movies. We're all videographers now, videoing things constantly. Then you are to look at a long, in-depth story. So I see that even in compared to me to my students, you know, they're much more informed than ever before, but they're not informed to the level of depth or of an ability to analyze something like we used to be, because we used to read a lot less information, but much more detail. Whereas today you guys are aware of lots and lots of things, but not in the level of detail we were. So you need to investigate this visual stuff that you're seeing. If you're relying on a lot of visual stuff, you need to investigate it carefully. Look at how movies may be changed, or videos may be changed, or photos may be manipulated, how charts could be mislabeled, things like that. So one thing you can do is use a reverse image search to find image sources. And before we get to that, let me ask you this fundamental question. Is seeing believing? People often say, well, I saw it with my own eyes. What do you see here? What's happening here? Is this a good thing or a bad thing, what's happening? Anybody want to guess? Want to make a estimate or a generalization? Is this something good or bad? Can you imagine how two people might see this entirely differently? In other words, what I'm saying is maybe it's true that believing is seeing. What you believe already determines what you see there. Is this oppression by this terrible police force, or is this the good guys saving us from the bad guys? Depending on your prior experiences with police, you may see things in very different ways. So what our pre-existing conditions are will influence how we see things. That's one issue. Look at this one here. Is this a good soldier or a bad soldier? Well, it depends on how you crop the image, right? If the image is this, you could crop it this way. are this way. You should look very carefully. Look at the original sources of these pictures you're seeing. See if anything's been cropped out. For example, I saw there's some pictures that were taken of supposedly Ukrainian army harassing and mistreating Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine before the Putin sent the army in. And it showed this person that was supposedly wounded by Ukrainians. He lost his leg. But then in the background, they showed a darkened area. It was clear it was someone that darkened that part of the picture. So if you find the original picture, it shows that's his what do you call it? The substitute for the leg. What do you call this? The artificial leg he's taken off, put to the side there to make it look like prosthetic. Yeah, it's this prosthetic leg laying over in the corner. They blackened it out, you know. So just because you see something doesn't necessarily make it true. For example, we all remember this time when the Seahawks burned the American flag after the victory in the locker room, right? You remember this picture? You all remember this big incident when they were burned the American flag? You don't remember that? Nobody remembers this?
No.
No?
I remember seeing the picture.
Yeah, Trump was making comments about how the NFL players were disloyal because of the kneeling that Dennis Kaepernick did. So there was this story passed around the internet that they're unpatriotic. Well, of course, it's not a real picture. This is the original picture. It's just been photoshopped. But people still are quoting that source as this is NFL players burning the American flag in the locker room to this day. So I remember back when, right after the so-called Muslim ban was announced, which meant that there were certain six countries were identified as looking at special scrutiny for immigration from those countries, but it was called by opponents of Trump the Muslim travel ban. When that was announced, a couple of days later, I was deluged with emails from my friends and our text messages from my friends saying, look what's happened to this poor American boy from a Muslim country. He's an American citizen though, at International Airport right now, at Bush Intercontinental Airport. We need to all rush out there and protest. And a lot of people did rush out there to protest the travel ban at the Intercontinental Airport. I got this picture from several of my friends saying, look, this terrible thing happening here. Did anybody see this picture before?
No, I didn't remember.
Yeah. What I didn't know is at the time, this same picture was going out to people all over the country saying, rush out to Chicago here and the New York airport and the Washington, D.C. airport, and everybody was told to go out to their airport. This is happening right now. It wasn't though. How do I know if this is a real picture? How do you know if it's a real picture? Go to the suspicious photo, save it on your computer, then go to google.com, click on images. And under images, you'll see here a little button here. It says reverse image search. Now you can do this on lots of other sources besides Google. It's just the one that most people are familiar with. If you want to Google other reverse image searches, you can do it another way. But you'll click on that picture and this will pop up. So it says you can upload your image right here. You press that, then go to your file and upload the image, wherever you saved it from your desktop or whatever, right? And then look at the results. It will tell you where the photo originally came from. You'll see the original posting of that photo, lots of different contexts all over the internet. It may have been photoshopped afterwards, you'll see the difference that way. It may have a timestamp on it, you'll see that. Maybe something that's been edited or cropped out of it, you'll see that as well. So actually, no, this did not happen in Intercontinental. No, this was happening in a schoolroom. He wasn't an immigrant or anything like that either. He was a kid that was under detention by the security guard there for doing something temporarily. But it was from about 5 years before. You can see that yourself if you look it up. There actually was a real story that happened where an American kid of Iranian descent was detained briefly in an airport, but it was because his mother was detained and they didn't want to separate her from his mother. So that separated him from his mother. It was a brief detention and then they were let go. So that real story morphed into something much more outrageous than that. And it still is being repeated today for that matter. One of the things when you get into these reverse image searches, you realize that people are still passing those stories around even today. Now this one's happened just recently. You remember you see these pictures of the Haitian immigrants being whipped apparently by Border Patrol? Being whipped, we were told. They were whipping them from the horses. Now this was not photoshopped, these pictures were, but it still could be misleading depending on how it's explained to people. We were told they were being whipped and it looks like he's whipping somebody with this rein there, right? But actually, the way you ride a horse is to slightly tap the horse on both sides to direct it to go one way or the other. If he didn't do that, he would have run over these immigrants with the horse possibly. It's a way you steer the horse. It's called riding a horse, actually. And this is not being whipped over here. He's grabbing with his hand, as you can see. Whether you support this policy or not is a different issue, but we should know the truth about it either way. That's the point. So you can reverse image search. You can look into these videos and graphs and see if it's what you're seeing is actually real. Also, don't forget, neglect to use multiple respected fact checkers. There are lots of good fact checkers out there. Now, people will sometimes say, well, how do you know the fact checkers are being honest? Well, that's a reasonable question. Well, the whole business model of a fact checker site depends on being straightforward and honest about it. People don't advertise on them. They don't spend their advertising revenue there if they don't have a good reputation. And if they fact check improperly, unfairly, if they have a reputation for not doing it properly, they're not going to get advertising dollars. They're going to go out of business. The whole business model is based on that. So as long as you're using the respected fact checkers, such as these up here, for example, these are some of them. If you want, you can look on my learning web page right here to find those fact checking sites. There's others here that are general purpose ones that also cover politics as well. Some of you probably have heard of Snopes.com. It's kind of one of the most respected ones for the general purpose ones. They do politics as well as other things there. But check on multiple fact-checking sites and see if they have a story about it. That's good practice if you ever suspect a bad story or unfair story. Now there's something I call the smell it test. Does it smell right? Does this story seem sensible? Does it sound suspicious? If a story has not been fact-checked, maybe it's a news story, there's not a lot of credible arguments debunking it, and you do a reverse image search and you find nothing there, then what do? Well, that's where you have to use the smell test, as I said. Like, for example, this one. I got this picture from a viral email sent to me by people who are always sending me viral emails that were really badly disguised fake news. But they sent this. I mean, look at this terrible, ungrateful immigrant here in Phoenix, Arizona, protesting. This is despicable. He's an illegal alien, apparently, and he's coming here saying, give us free health care, free jobs, no taxes. We shouldn't have paid taxes on our jobs even. We have a free house, a free food. You owe us, America. Does this sound to you like what an immigrant would say, especially one who's coming illegally that's trying to avoid detention or being caught? And then below it, that he says, we will shoot more police in Arizona till we get free. Really? Does this pass the smell test? Does this sound credible? I did a reverse image search on it, couldn't find any examples of where this originals. I thought maybe he had a different sign that's been photoshopped over it, right? Is that what most of you are probably thinking, I'm guessing? A Photoshop over that? Sounds credible, but nobody's really able to it's either very good Photoshop work or it's not that, because they've been not able to find the original source of it. I searched for hours for this original picture, couldn't find anywhere. So then I have to ask the question, does it pass the smell test? Is it likely? You know, is this something that sounds probable? If you've ever been in a protest, you know that if someone, like if it's a left-wing protest and someone holds up a hammer and sickle and a sign, the other protesters are going to tell them to take it down. And they're going to force them to take it down because they get rid of that. You're discrediting us. Or if it's a right-wing protest and they hold up a swastika or something, a Nazi symbol, the other protesters are going to tell them, get that out of here. We're not going to let you do that because you discredit us. So these people out here with American flags, the peaceful protest, they really think they're going to allow this guy to continue in the protest with them? After all, this is a terroristic threat he's making here. You think that they would allow this? Do you think the police would allow this even? Ask that question. Would the police allow him to walk along with this? Or would they tear that sign up? He's making a terroristic threat. They would either arrest him or take the sign away from him, at a bare minimum. So you basically have three possibilities here. It's photoshopped. That's possible, but I couldn't find evidence of that. Maybe he's a plant. In other words, he's somebody that came into this picture for a moment to get a picture of it and then left. He wasn't one of the protesters. He did it to get a bad picture of the protest. For example, when Hillary Clinton was having a protest in one of the state capitals, I can't remember which state it was in, they had this rally inside the state capitol with her paraphernalia up, you know, her vote for Hillary Clinton campaign advertising. And another person comes into the crowd, he has a big sign, he holds it up, and somebody else with him takes a picture of him, and then he runs out. And the people at the time were wondering, who is this? What did he do? So within hours, all over the social media, it said, this guy had a sign that said, rape Melania, advocating the rape of President Trump's wife, Melania. Well, obviously, he was not one of the Hillary Clinton supporters. He was a plant that was put in there to get a bad picture. So all over the internet, people are seeing this picture now saying, look what Hillary Clinton people are saying. They're saying they're advocating the rape of Melania Trump. but that's a plant. So that happens sometimes in these pictures. Or maybe it's actually real, but again, it really just doesn't pass the smell test. It's insightful to the police, it's illegal, it's a terroristic threat, and the other people will probably invite them to take it down. So you should be asking these kind of skeptical questions if you see something that doesn't seem right. Maybe some examples of further skeptical questions you can ask if you don't see a good debunking of it already on the internet. First of all, what's the source? What kind of motivations does the source have? If it's about an industry that might suffer from a story or might benefit from a story, that might be reason to question it, right? Is it humor, a parody? I'm still getting messages from students sometimes that say, Mr. Till, look at this site here. Look at this story you made, this incredible thing. And I see their site, the site that they're sourcing is The Onion. If you don't know what The Onion is, it's a parody site. It's a joke site, right? It's political satire, but people think it's a real source. Does it have a website? And if so, is it the real website? Go to the organization, Google the organization and with a separate search and see if that's their real URL. It may be just one that looks like the URL. Some people use credible sources and make up a website that sounds like that credible source, but it's not their real website. So it looks just like it. So investigate that. Another question is what is the full story here? Most people don't read the full story. I shouldn't say most, I don't know if that's true, but a lot of people do not read the actual news story they cite. Someone makes an argument and says, here's my source, and it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, some very good source, some very consistently good reporting. But they know you're not going to actually read the story. They just cite the article because it has an ambiguous headline, and they say, that's my source. So you have to actually read it and see, is that really what this source says? Because sometimes it's not. Do their allegations check other facts can be verified? Go to other sources, go to other sites and see those reputable sites as well. Are the terms being used qualified, vague, and interpretable, unclear? Are they using really pushy, fuzzy words just to try to make it more credible without real clarity? Are they exaggerating things? Is it emotionally loaded terms? Instead of like an increase in the budget, are they saying instead of a decrease in the budget, like a 0.1% decrease in the budget, are they saying we've slashed the budget? A loaded term. They call these terms that are very emotional charged. Are they using these kind of assumptions? Are they saying should we fire the unloyal, disreputable, corrupt, crooked member of Congress? Or are they saying should we fire this member of Congress? Are the tacit, are the adjectives and adverbs they use to describe something have hidden sort of or very not even hidden, very clear negative connotations or not? That's what I mean by this. So are the terms straightforward? Are they qualified and vague, interpretable? What about the data they're using? Are they using statistics selectively, only giving you part of the picture? Are they leaving off something? Is there something maybe they didn't explain? Are they manipulating you through statistics? Is this information very, very selective about a particular topic, or is it comprehensive and broad? And we can't make policies the basis of an anecdote or a story. It has to be about a wide, comprehensive study. What's the context, the time, the circumstances? Look for things like dates on pictures, for example. Look for things in the background. For example, that story, I got to show you this one more time. Back here, he says this is happening in Phoenix, Arizona, right? Well, that's the Los Angeles Times building in the background. So it's obviously not happening in Phoenix, Arizona. So to look at things like that as well. What's the context of the story, the time, the circumstances? Some stories that get passed around the internet go round and round for years and years. They get changed into the local dialect or the local stories over circumstances. If it's a soccer game, if it's about a soccer game here, it's going to be about a football game in the United States. But they change some of the parts of it to make it sound credible, but they use the same basic information, same basic manipulation, just different names and times. Are these reputable sites? Do they have actual quotes? You can go to the actual site and see, is that really what the quote says? Look at a search and go to their official site first and see if that's actually the quote that they really said, or they're misquoting them. If they're talking about polls, are these professional posters? Or are they some poll you've never heard of before? Go to their sites, look at one of these professional poll sites, for example, and see if they have similar results. If someone says, well, Biden is 84% popular right now, I'm going to say, why don't these professional pollers show that? There must be something wrong. This must not be a professional polling site. Are the photographs genuine? Like I said, they could be photoshopped. Look at the background, the colors, the consistency. There was another picture that was supposedly from these Russians that had been attacked by the Ukrainian army in eastern Ukraine. They showed a dead body in a car that had been burned. Well, that was probably from an autopsy, because if you look at it carefully, the skull has been cut. That's what they do in autopsies to look at the brain. So that wouldn't happen randomly, a straight cut across the skull, if it was in a car wreck or a missile hit the car. It'd be in an autopsy. There's lots of things you can look at like that to see if it makes sense. Look at backgrounds, landmarks. A lot of times famous people have, that they have gray hair now or black hair at the time. So that wasn't a recent picture probably. Maybe sometimes they show people that are already dead now in these pictures. Look for timestamps. There's lots of ways you can investigate the photograph more carefully even if you don't do a reverse image search. Does the information recognize alternative possible explanations? If it's a good story written by a credible source, they're going to say there may be other explanations here. They're going to be careful about making really bold assumptions, like this airstrike was done on purpose. We know for a fact Putin himself directly caused this airstrike to happen. They'll say it could have been civilians that could have been targeted, but it could have been also targeting in a nearby airport. Like, it looks like there's more and more targeting of civilian areas now, but in the first parts of the war, there was some civilians that were near targets like air bases, for example. So you don't know for sure if that's the intent. So a good resource, a good journalist will have some degree of humility and recognize there are other factors to consider. Sometimes this may be one cause. You don't just say that because one person said something that's a truth. You're humble in your reporting. And then finally, sometimes the stories that are really, really fantastical, that claim outrageous things, very unexpected, very unlikely things, are the ones that circulate the most. These disastrous things, these tragic things, these crazy, wild things. We've been invaded by aliens from the planet Xenopharon or something, and that's a really crazy story. Well, you have to ask yourself, why aren't the other news organizations reporting this? Is it really because it's a conspiracy? Only these, personal blogs made in someone's grandmother's basement are reporting this story. The New York Times doesn't want to cover this. We're being invaded by aliens and they don't want to cover this story. Why is that? Wouldn't they want to be in on that story? Or what if it's, something like, if you eat Skippy peanut butter, you'll explode. Don't you think Skippy peanut butter would out there talking about this a little bit and, showing how that's false or something? There's a reason why these other stories are not being passed around, because they're false. That's probably the biggest reason. So more fantastic the story, the more the burden of proof is on them to prove it, not on you. So that's what I would argue you should do to protect yourself from bad news. I've got some more if y'all want to see some more, but I think we're out of time for this portion of it. I'll leave you with this slide to think about. That part of your responsibility is to debate healthy as well, right? Not just to look for information yourself, but how you express that to other people, how you argue politics with other people, how you debate things. For example, not to use attacks that are illogical, that are fallacious, like we mentioned earlier. The burden of proof and causality is on the person making the claim, not you. If I claim to you I'm from Mars, then it's up to me to prove that. It's not for you to disprove it. Also, you shouldn't be making personal attacks on people. Debate their arguments, debate their premises, their conclusions, not the person making the argument. Even if Adolf Hitler himself said it's cold today, that doesn't make it false. It is cold. And it's not the speaker that matters. It's the argument itself. It's whether it's cold or warm. Careful generalizations. That means one case doesn't make a rule, and general rules have exceptional cases. Don't overgeneralize. Passion is great in many ways, but it's not a good argument, right? It's not a better argument because you yell, or because you're angry, because you're emotional, or because most people believe it, or because some celebrity influencer said it. Even authorities that should know better don't prove it alone. You need actual argument. Substance over style. Just because someone has a rhyming slogan or a good meme or a mannerism or something, that's not a substitute for an argument. Some substance over anecdotes. Too many people base their decisions on one person said something. My friend said he heard someone from their neighbor's nephew. That's not evidence. That's hearsay. Fair-mindedness. A good constructive debate is one in which people recognize that other people have good arguments too. Even if I don't conclude overall that their position is the best, I still take my position. I might be willing to recognize that some of their points make sense. They have some good, sensible points there. They're more likely to listen to me if I'm fair with them as well. Open-mindedness means a real critical thinker, a real intellectual is willing to change their mind sometimes. To say, maybe that information I saw before is wrong. Maybe I should reevaluate. It's only a fool that never changes their mind, no matter what evidence they see. And then finally, intellectual humility. Like I said earlier, a real intellectual is not arrogant. They don't know the truth. They get closer to the truth the more they study. They believe in that the debate is about getting closer to the truth and seeking the truth, not being right, not winning the argument always, but by being to true intellectual. Okay, do you want to end this now, Sean, or should we?
Yeah, we are pretty much running out about time. So if there's any other points you want to make or open up for questions.
Questions, yeah.
All right, the floor is open. I see there are 26 of you. So hi, this is a great crowd. So we've gotten some really amazing information about critical thinking and reviewing your sources. Please ask any questions that you may have about maybe anything you've been seeing recently or how to tackle any pieces of information you've been coming across. You have a wonderful source here, a wonderful resource here, and Professor Tiller to help you. And we welcome you to unmute or pop questions into the chat. It's a very quiet group today. That's not entirely unusual, but I will say some of the photos that you shared while we're waiting. Oh, hang on, I see something in the chat. Oh, do you see the chat now, Professor Tiller?
Yes, I see that. Okay. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Yareli.
Some of the photos that you were sharing, I had seen around social media, and I did a reverse Google search on a photo like that one time, but the other person didn't want to hear it.
Of course not. And that's what drives me crazy is that even when you fact check someone or you say, look, there's another source here, you made a mistake or something, they just say, well, I was just passing it on, you know, or they don't send a follow-up to the 40 other people they sent it to saying, wait a minute, that was wrong. When people say, I was just passing it on, that to me, it makes me want to say, well, if you found, you know, a bomb in the schoolyard, would you just pass it on to the children? So that these things are like bombs in our social argument and debate.
So I see a question about, will the recording be posted to look back? Yes. So
please take out the first part.
Right. So I'm gonna see if Dominique does any editing, right? But yes, the event, this event, as with all life hacking events, will be available for playback on the Student Life YouTube channel. And anybody who registered for the session or is coming to the session should be receiving that playback link in their email once it's processed.
If anybody has any questions also about what's happening in Ukraine or Russia, that would be interesting to me also as well, if you have any questions about it. I actually am in contact with Russians and Ukrainians pretty much on a daily basis because I have a lot of friends there, both sides. And in fact, all the Russians I know are pretty much pro-Ukrainian the position on this. They're very unhappy with Putin and their government.
If anybody does, after they process the information they're hearing today, or if they hear, or if they get to see this information on playback, are you available for answering questions, or what would be the best way to? So what would be the best way to reach out to you?
I guess email.
And your email would be mark.tiller at hccs.edu.
Right.
And I'm throwing that in the chat for the folks who are here with us. Terrific. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much again for sharing that information and to giving us some tips for how to tackle those pieces of information as we come across them. And again, everybody, please reach out to Professor Tiller if you have questions. Emails in the chat, mark.tiller@hccs.edu. And I do have a couple of wrap-up points if there's no further questions. So as a reminder, as I already stated, the event will be available for playback via the Student Life YouTube channel. All attendees who stayed for the entire event will be placed in a raffle, and there's 3 $25 gift cards to be awarded to winners. Please be on the lookout for an email. If you are a winner, you will get notified via your student email. And if you're attending this event for Eagle Points will be awarded within 2 business days of the event. And then next week is spring break. there's no life hacking next week because I hope everybody is going to have a most amazing and restful week. But we will be back with life hacking on Tuesday, March 22nd, right after spring break, for budgeting like a boss with Michaela Warren. So please, everybody, join us for that. Thank you again, Professor Tiller, for joining us today. And I see the thank yous flooding in the chat.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, guys.
And I wish everybody a wonderful week, a wonderful spring break, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you, everyone.
Buena suerte.